Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played 774 games with the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. And I think he would say that he was good to very good in all of those games. But I'm going to put him on the spot when we start out today by asking him, Tom, there's been a lot of athletes that have weighed in on what's going on in our country right now, including players from the NHL. Antti Kopitar has had something to say about it. Evander Kane has had something to say about it. I was really impressed with what Austin Matthews had to say about what was happening as well. How do you feel about athletes coming out and discussing their political feelings? We'll call them that, but I think this goes beyond politics. But for the lack of anything better, we'll call it their political feelings. That, historically, we see a lot of NBA players let their feelings be known, but we don't often see hockey players weighing in on politics. Where do you come down in terms of whether or not you like to see NHL players have something to say?
Well, I think especially in a situation like this, and unfortunately with the death in Minnesota and now all the riots, I think it's important that I think athletes have such a voice, and a lot of people listen to them more than they should. So if athletes are coming forward and say, listen, what happened to the gentleman in Minnesota is wrong, terribly wrong, and we need to change things, but we've got to stop the violence. We've got to stop the looting. The mall, here in New York, we had a woman throw a Molotov cocktail at a police car. I think when athletes step out and say, guys, listen, you're doing it wrong. The cause is good. We've got to change things. We can't continue to have things happen like they did in Minnesota. But change. You hope that not everybody, but more people are going to listen to an athlete, whether it makes sense or not. I think that is the case with a lot of people. If an athlete speaks out like that, you'll get a lot of other people that are out there riding stop and say, okay, he's right. It's LeBron James. I respect him so much, or whoever the athlete is. So I think it's important. And then you go into, Colin Kaepernick, his name has been brought up a few times, and his stance that he took kneeling during the national anthem. See, the problem with that is, though, that it's taking away from, his job, his profession, and for everybody, all the other coaches. I think you and I did a podcast on this one time, I think, talking about this stuff. And it just, to me, it took away from why people were there. People are there to watch football. They weren't there to listen to his political views there. But I think in that case with Colin Kaepernick, I think it's great for Colin Kaepernick to step up now and make a statement to say, guys, we need to stop the violence. So I do think it's important that they do, because they do have a voice that a lot of people listen to.
Yeah. I'm a little bit hypocritical about this. There's some hypocrisy in my thinking. I've said often, if I was an athlete, I don't understand why any athlete would get too involved in the use of social media, because more often than not, it gets them in trouble. It really does. And yet, I'm thankful that we've seen hockey players kind of weigh in here, because I think this is sort of a cause that, I think it helps when athletes do weigh in, especially something like this, where it's been a continuous problem in this country for beyond a century. And let me ask you this, though. I read, I think it was an Associated Press scoop. They got a copy of a memo that Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, wrote to his staff members about what went on with George Floyd and the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and the impact on sports and so forth. And in that memo, he talked about how proud he was. In the NBA, some of them have at least one I'm aware of, maybe two, have actually joined the protests, have gone out and have been in the streets as well. And Silver said he was proud of that. Do you think the NHL feels the same way? Do you think the league office is happy to see their athletes, and would they like it, or would they cringe if their athletes went out and joined the protests?
Well, But I think it's how you're during the protest, right? I mean, obviously, if they're going to go smash windows and steal stuff, they're not going to be proud of that.
Well, Tom, that isn't the protest. The protests are usually over by the time that all starts. There's the protests that run until the curfew, and then after the curfew, it's riot and chaos.
Right. But unfortunately, the two are being tied together. The media's tied together. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the people who kind of understand how these works aren't tying them together, but maybe the general consensus is.
I agree. Totally. But then that's the problem, right? So okay, separate the two. We're not talking about the rioting and the breaking the windows. We're talking about them going out. I would think that they would be proud of it. Like I heard a couple of stories. It's just my mind who it was. I think it was a basketball player went down to Atlanta. I think that's where he's playing, and helped clean up the streets the next morning after a riot. Yeah. Like if I'm the league, man, that's great stuff to me, right? He's trying to find a solution, and there's been lots of good stories too, where they're reaching out to, like was it P.K. Subban that had a thing down in Nashville when he played there, where he brought a police officer in to his suite every night, and then 2 or 3 kids from a predominantly black neighborhood, and had them come together and sit together at the game. I think he had something like that going on. So there's a lot of athletes do a lot of good things like that probably don't get recognized as much, and they're currently doing it now too. So if I'm a league, I love it when guys get involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've had an NBA player I know drove 15 hours to join and walk in a protest. And, in my home state here, there's been a lot of notoriety. It's come to a sheriff who came down and walked with protesters, a county sheriff who just came in and joined, and that got a lot of publicity, But I was really impressed by the athletes who have gone on social media and had their say, and I thought it was interesting that Austin Matthews identified himself as a Latino American. As we all know, his grandparents, his mother's parents still live in Mexico.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that about Austin Matthews.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. No, his parents, his grandparents live. They watch his games by satellite television, but they still live in America. That would be his mother's parents, and his mother was born in Mexico. And then moved to this country. I don't know the particulars of when she came or how she came, but his dad was from California and his mother was originally from Mexico, and then he grew up obviously in Arizona. So it's to me, I think this is a little bit stretching for the NHL. Like, for example, Evander Kane had something to say, and he said it was important that athletes, and he identified Sidney Crosby and Tom Brady were the two he brought up. Like he said, it's important for top athletes to come out and have something to say. Now, as much as I appreciate people speaking out, I didn't particularly care for that. Like I think putting another athlete on the spot, like that's not your business. Maybe Tom Brady and Sidney Crosby just aren't comfortable in that role. You shouldn't be forced into doing that. That doesn't come with the turf of being a superstar. If that's what you want to do, then we admire you. But
that's interesting, man. I guess Evander Kane, obviously, like he comes from a different place too. So I I kind of, like you said before, I'm kind of a hypocrite here, I think, a little bit, because part of me thinks that he did the right thing. He's trying to push more athletes to come out. But yes, I guess the other part is correct. You can't force somebody to do it. And who knows what that other athlete is maybe doing behind the scenes too. Like that's the thing I think is missed sometimes. That a lot of athletes do things behind the scenes that nobody ever sees. So,
yeah. And I know Sidney Crosby fairly well.
Yeah.
And that is certainly true with.
Yeah.
Crosby's very active in making sure that a lot of kids get equipment who otherwise couldn't afford it. That he's been involved in that for years, and that's something that's kind of never comes up. I want to talk about one other subject here. We'll move off of that a little bit, and I think this is fascinating to me. The NHL, as I think you and I pretty much thought would happen, is committing to testing players every day.
Yes.
So the swab up the nose every day.
Lovely.
Now, what's interesting about that is the cost of that.
Yeah.
According to the reporting, the cost will be somewhere between $100 and $125 a test.
Mhm.
So before we get to, that's essentially going to be $1 million every 12 days. So before we get through the play-in round, that's going to be a minimum of 5 weeks. That's going to be $3 million or roughly.
So you're including training camp in that then, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So we're going to. I mean, this is going to cost the NHL millions of dollars to do this, and I think that shows the commitment that they have to safety, because I've not heard any pushback from the idea of testing every day.
Yeah. Well, and I hate to put it, it's not all. They're not. I think you had used a number before. Didn't they say if they just stopped the season right now and didn't have the playoffs, they'd lose north of $1 billion? Right? Was it one?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So no, they're not going to recoup all of that money, obviously. But I guess if you look at, let's say they even get half of it, so $600 million. I guess to spend $3 million to make 600, right?
Well, they're going to spend a lot more than $3 million. That's $3 million just to get them through the play-in round, and then we're still going to have 16 teams left. Yeah. So 16, what
do you cost it $10 million though? I mean, it's to make over $600 million, right?
Well, yeah, true. But I mean, you could try to say, well, let's do it every other day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could say, or we'll do it 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Or we'll do it. So they're not pinching any pennies as far as safety.
Yeah. What's interesting too, and I go kind of on the same subject. I was listening to Brian Burke the other day, and I was one that was saying, like, geez, the player's going to like this about being sequestered away from their family for months at a time. But, Brian, I can't remember, he was on some show, Sportsnet or something, talking about it. And he was true. I thought about it afterwards. That really, for what, so how many teams not making the playoffs? 7 or 9?
7 are not playing any hockey.
Right. So those players obviously not going to be sequestered. So that's 7 teams right away. And then now you got training camp, so it's 3 weeks. But then within probably a week of that, so 4 weeks, 8 other teams now will be sent home as well, right? So it's not like the whole league in mass is going to be away from the family for months. Now, unfortunately, for the 2 teams that go to the finals, it's going to be a long time that they're sequestered away from their family. So to Brian's point, it was, I guess the majority, it isn't like the majority of the league is going to be sequestered away from their family. And he actually brought up a good point too, where a lot of these guys aren't used to being home with their family as much as they have been now anyways, right? Some of them are like chomping at the bit to get out and play hockey. So just
yeah. Some people like that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Less responsibility and so forth. But it'll be at least 5 weeks where they'll have everyone, because it's going to take you can't do a 5-game series in a week. So if we do,
or what if somebody loses in 3 games though? Right.
So but you're for the most of those teams are going to be involved. We won't have that many sweeps. Do you think?
Yeah, I don't see it. I've heard so many people talking this subject. Your boy Barry Trotz, I forgot to mention this. He was on the radio here talking about coming back, and it's just like the unexpected, because we've never been through this before. These athletes, especially of today, have never been away from the game for as long as these guys have been away from the game, not being able to train at the same level that they've been able to train. So to me, I don't know. I mean, is it like I said, I'm of the belief that the more skilled teams are going to have an easier transition in playing. So does the Toronto Maple Leafs. They come out flying against Columbus, and Columbus just can't keep up, can't get their game going, and all of a sudden the series is over with. It's just the unknown on that. I think there's a possibility of that. I think the league has gotten better and better with the parity, where you don't have those runaway series anymore. It seems like you get better, longer, better series, tighter games all the time. But is that going to be the case now with this break? That's just the unknown.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, we can sit here and predict all we want, and we think. And I've been influenced a lot by you on this, but I've also, put your theory to other general managers, and they agree with it. The offense will be ahead of the defense, but what if it's not? What if the rust is on the game and they just can't shake it off? And they're playing that way, but we're normally in situations where they might bury it, they're just missing by an inch because their time is off.
Could be very true. Yeah, I have to think though with those I keep thinking of Austin Matthews and Martyr and Toronto. They're gonna have a 3-week training camp, right? So 3 weeks for a young kid like that. And they haven't been sitting around doing nothing. I've been seeing videos of Marner stick handling out in his. It's not the same as being on the ice, but he's out in the driveway, stick handling and everything. So, yeah, it's the unknown in that part. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you really, you think, well, these guys are going to come in and they're going to, they're still elite level athletes, but I still believe the veterans might be ahead of the younger players just because they have more tools at their disposal, and I think they know. They've learned through all their years in the league the importance of what needs to be done in order to stay sharp.
Yeah,
so,
I know we talked about the Boston Bruins before, and listened to Sweeney, the general manager, get an interview too. And he's smart. He wasn't. It's the interviewer was trying to get him almost to complain because they're getting a raw deal. It seems like they've been arguably the best team in the league, and all of a sudden they have to have like a round robin tournament to get reseeded again, and they've got all those veteran guys as well. So. But he wasn't buying into it. He was like, nope, it's the same for everybody, and we just got to go play. I don't know if he really felt like that or not, but I think that's the message you certainly got to send.
What would you have been like being sequestered? I mean, would you have been looking to break out after day 2 or?
No question. Yeah, that's what I think to myself about these young kids, and I was the same way. And you kind of, for an athlete to make it to the elite level, they have to have a little bit of that feeling that I'm invincible, right? That I can't get hurt. It's not like they're disrespecting anybody else, but they live like that. That I can get anything done, and they've done it. So during this, I'm sure there's been some of them, at least part time, have not maybe taken care of themselves like they should, as far as the pandemic is concerned. But yeah, I would have definitely had that attitude. Okay, I've got to be respectful of other people, but I'm not going to get it because I'm Tom Laidlaw, right? So,
yeah. Now, how do you feel? Like, first of all, how many people do you think they'll have to test on a team? I figured about 40. I don't know, like how big the rosters will be, but 30 maybe.
Yeah, the 30-man roster they were talking about. And then
right. So, and then you got these coaches and trainer, equipment guy. The big question I still have is what are we going to do about the older folks? Is David Poile and Barry Trotz, or I know Barry Trotz is going, but David Poile, Jimmy Rutherford, all the older GMs in the league, will they to travel with the team, or will they just stay home and because what they don't have to be there now. Right. They're all going to want to be there. What do you think they'll do? And is that, should the league say to all the people over?
Normally on a game day. So I'm trying to think of a general manager. The general manager really wouldn't have any contact with the team on most cases. He'd be upstairs. So maybe a guy like David Poile could go to the game but sit up in the press box, so he never have to have contact with anybody, really.
Yeah, but I mean, why go if that's because what David Poile likes to do is to have meetings with his coaches.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, that's to be honest, I felt that was a bit of an issue when Peter Laviolette was coaching Nashville. David Poile for years has been likes to be close to his coaches and everything, and that's not the way Peter Laviolette operated. So, David would have to change his ways, and he's not the only one. Dale Talon, there's a lot of Lou Lamoriello, who was always around. What do those guys do? We still have all the television and radio people. Doc Emery.
I was talking to Dave Maloney, who works for MSG here in New York, about it. And they still haven't given him any idea of what they're planning on doing if they come back and play as far as broadcasting. Are they going to be in a booth someplace away from the arena? They've got all the technology to do that. Like I've told you, I worked when I covered the KHL, the Russian league. That's what we did. We had the feed come in from Russia, and we sat in a booth in Stamford, Connecticut. Another gentleman and I, and we did the game from there. So they've got the technology to do it. It wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Well, I missed the first part of that because I faded out there. Did he say that he thought they were going to do it from a studio, or
No, he really. It sounded like they just didn't know yet. They really he's been asking, and there just hasn't been any decision. It seems like it seems like maybe that's one of the last things they're going to worry about, right? They've got to worry about all the players and training camp and everything. So, but definitely the technology is there to do that, to do it remotely.
Yeah,
and maybe that's the same thing with the David Poile, right? Maybe. You've got all Zoom meetings. You do FaceTime with the coaches if you want to, but just don't. It makes more sense not to be at the rink at all.
Yeah, well, with all the precautions we're taking to assure that the players are safe, we should certainly take even more for the people who are in the high risk zones. And now, what do we think about the players with underlying disabilities? The Rangers have one, the Canadians have one for sure that we know about, and I've said all along, and as it should be. There may be players who have issues that they're simply not ever discussing. So, what happens with them?
Well, so Kaapo Kakko with the Rangers is he diabetic? What did he have?
Yeah, I think he is diabetic. I think that's the issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got it doesn't matter what the age is, but you got this young potential superstar player. You want to have him playing, but is it better just have him stay away right now? That's going to be this is going to be a tough one. Like the Major League Baseball negotiations to try to get back and play. One of the things that the players just tabled a new offer to the owners. I think it was last night or Friday they did it. And part of it was that the players, what they proposed was that if players had a problem with coming back and playing during the pandemic, that they could be able to opt out and actually still get paid too. Now that's the one thing I think is interesting. I don't know if a lot of fans recognize with the NHL. They get Major League Baseball now trying to negotiate, a new 1-year deal to come back and play during the pandemic. But I know you know this, but the NHL players have already been paid all their money to play in the National Hockey League, and now they're coming back. I love this part. They're coming back to win a Stanley Cup. They're not coming back to get paid. Now they can get a small bonus that's relatively small compared to what they make during the regular season. But I just love the fact that this is a real sign that they're coming back to play. To play for the Stanley Cup. Yes, there's money involved in it. There's no question to help the cap for next year. But as far as them getting paid, they've gotten their money already for the season, and they're purely come back to win the Cup.
Yeah, I agree with you. And and Mike Emmerich has always enjoyed that as well. That you basically pay for nothing.
Yeah.
To try to win the Cup. Although, someone has told me along the line. It might have been someone from the Players Association. Your contract actually says that you got to play in the playoff.
Yeah, yes.
So you'd be in violation of your contract if you didn't come back and play. But
you don't have to be like Patrice Bergeron or play with a punctured lung. And
no. But in essence, I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree with that. Yeah. A couple of minor things I wanted to talk to you about that. I saw this week that Henrik Lundqvist said that he wanted to play beyond his contract, which is what he told me last fall. And I wondered, given the fact that things haven't gone well with the Rangers, at least in terms of his future, because they've got quality young goalies to replace him, whether he'd have a different mind frame. Because he also told me he planned to stay in and live in New York City for the rest of his life. Which is it's pretty unusual for a Swedish player. They almost always go home. Yep. And I wondered if that was all changed. So it seems like that isn't going to alter his plan a little bit. So here's my question to you. Where should Henrik Lundqvist go? What's a good fit for him as he looks around? Look around the landscape. I like two teams that I'd really like to see. I think that would be good. I would like Colorado or Carolina. I think both of those would be good fits.
Yeah. What about New Jersey?
Well, then he wouldn't have to move, but
that's not going to be a trade, right? So he's got another year after this season is complete. He's got another year in his contract.
Yeah.
So the Rangers aren't going to trade him to New Jersey and play.
Well, plus, would he want to go there? Like, at his age, like if he goes to Colorado.
So if he goes, I lost you there, Kevin. What did you say when he was to Colorado?
Yeah, if he goes to Colorado, he can win. If he goes to Carolina, he can win. If he goes to New Jersey, he just helps that team grow.
Well, if he goes to New Jersey, he's now can stay in Manhattan, still have his family in Manhattan, and and he's a proud guy, and I don't know if he'd say this overtly, but okay, now's a chance to go show the Rangers they made a mistake, right? They shouldn't have given up on him.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's a guy that wants to win more than he wants to, prove a point.
Yeah, well, but again, when they started the rebuild in New York, was that 3 years ago? They gave him the opportunity to leave, and he did.
Yeah, but that's different. That had been his. He'd been there the whole time.
Yeah, but if he wanted to win, then he would have said, "I'm not going to be able to win. The Rangers aren't going to."
Well, I agree with that, but I'm saying now that he's in this circumstance, then I think winning becomes paramount.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to have to move, you're going to want to go to a place you can win. You're not going to go to a place where you're going to be in the same situation again, where because if a goalie goes in that situation, if suddenly the Devils ended up with a great young goalie, they're going to suddenly do the same thing to him.
Right.
So
yeah, Jesus, I've always gotten the impression that he is such a New York guy to now say, okay, I'm going to move to Colorado. I mean, it's not a totally different world.
But let's put it this way: this is going to be such a strange season anyway. Right. If you could engineer a trade where starting in January, he's got to go from January till June or July, maybe early August, in a different city, and have a chance to win.
But what changes though? I mean, he's had his opportunity. They've gone to him to make the trade before the season before the trade deadline to try to trade him.
Well, the difference is the Rangers don't want him.
But they didn't want him then.
So
I mean, this whole year, it's been obvious that these two young goaltenders are the guys, and he's not going to play.
Right.
So, I mean, that was very clear before the trade deadline.
I don't think that he had a understanding that this season would go this way.
Oh yeah, yes he did.
Oh no.
Yes.
Oh no.
I think definitely. As the season progressed, it was.
I'm saying last September, when he prepared for this season,
right?
He had no idea.
But clearly, before the trade deadline had come, well before the trade deadline, it was very clear what was going on.
Yeah, no. That's for sure.
So he could have at that point said, "I want to win. I'm not going to play here. Yes, let's trade me."
Right.
And he wouldn't.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference between, getting traded in the off season and getting traded in the middle of the season.
Well, you've got more options of places to go, right? The team can trade, but again, he's got the no move clause, so he's really in control of or more in control of where he's going to go.
Yeah. So, well, maybe, but I don't know. I just don't see him going to New Jersey. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's the lifestyle living in New York. But if you're going to live in New York the rest of your life, going 6 months somewhere else doesn't seem like that.
Yeah, but if he wants to play beyond his contract,
well, he can still come back to New Jersey.
Yeah, no, he can come back as free agent at the end of it. Yeah, no question. Yeah. Well, like I said too, like I don't see how the Rangers would trade him to New Jersey as a trade unless they've got a really real quality return for him, because the three teams, the Devils, Islanders, Rangers, I mean, to trade a player of his caliber and then have to play against them over and over. So it would have to be something that he's a free agent. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's if I'm right on New Jersey, it's not going to be until he's a free agent when he can decide to go there. Right.
Yeah. I wonder if he even knows right now what he would do. I bet it's pretty confusing for him.
Yeah. You know what? To me, when I see him, I hardly ever spoke to him, so I don't know him that well, but he seems like a really proud man, right? Like he always wants to be the best player he can possibly be. He's constantly changing his game as he gets older and his training techniques and all that. So yeah, I'm assuming he sat there, and you're right, probably way back in September, and never would have imagined that anybody would take his job away from him for the New York Rangers. Like he was the goalie for the New York Rangers.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that he was totally fine with the idea as long as he was going to be the Rangers goalie. And I think he told me that he thought he could play beyond his contract then. So I'm thinking he liked the direction the Rangers were heading in, and he thought, I might be able to come out the other side. And then, then the younger goalies were far more advanced than he anticipated. And then suddenly he's found his situation different. And I know what you're saying. It's trade deadline. By then he knew the writing was on the wall. But maybe he's like Matt Sundin. Maybe you're right. Matt Sundin, if you remember when he was in Toronto and everybody said, "Go Mats, go try to win a cup," and he said, "No, I don't think so."
And Ray Borg balked at that idea with the Bruins. The Bruins weren't that good near the end of and he finally, got himself traded to Colorado, but he fought that for a while too. He was going to be a loyal Boston Bruin, right?
Yeah. Well, some guys like that, but there's no option for Lundqvist to do that now. I think that, and then the Rangers got the issue of one of their young goalies is going to end up playing for Seattle.
Yeah, I know.
That's another issue, unless they want to give Seattle, all sorts of stuff,
And they would trade. I mean, they would have to trade one of those guys. They'd have to get something for that goalie before they just let him go to Seattle. They'd get another goalie.
Oh, yeah, for sure they would. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I think is going to be different in this expansion draft is I think the GMs went to school last time, and they're not going to overpay, and they're not going to lose. Valuable players the way they are now. A team like the Detroit Red Wings or the Los Angeles Kings are teams that are rebuilding. They're going to end up with 2 or 3 players, because they're going to give something back that's better than Seattle can. And unless you could go the other way. You could go to Seattle and say, "Hey, look, I'm going to expose this guy, but if you want me to expose them, you're going to have to give me a 3rd-round pick."
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
They did. The GMs kind of panicked in a lot of cases.
They did. And I think like a player like James Neal, going back to that.
Yeah.
And the new way, James Neal would have been traded.
Yeah.
He would have gone somewhere for something.
Yeah.
Instead of a player being lost like that. But who knows? We'll have to see what happens with the goalies.
How's everything? I know we were run out of time here. How's everything with the riots and everything there in Detroit? Is it getting hit bad?
Well, we've got issues just like every other city. The sad thing, given my history, is that a lot of journalists are being targeted as well by the police. Which, I was watching the coverage on NBC, and Ali Veshti was shot with a rubber bullet. I was watching CNN, and the journalist was arrested. We've had a lot of reporters that have suffered injuries covering because the police aren't distinguishing anymore.
I got to tell you here, I've gotten to know a lot of police officers here in New York doing charity events and everything, and they were already demoralized. Just the attitude towards the police. The mayor of New York has been very negative towards the police. Has come up publicly, said stuff against them. So you talk to them prior to all this happening, they were totally demoralized. Now this is worse.
It's a hard situation, because I know everybody does not like the use of a few bad apples, because that doesn't really address the culture. I mean, in Minnesota. This issue, not the specific issue, but there's been problems with the race relations from the police there for years. They just gave this poll where Minnesota is considered one of the greatest places to live for white people, but when you poll black people, they rank among the worst in the country. And all of us have seen the legitimacy of the complaint of driving while black, or there's a complete difference when you and I have encounters with the police and when an African American does.
For us to try to say that we understand what it is to be black in America is just
no, we don't even. I saw it first time. It was in 2002. I had gone to tape a television spot, and they did it at a sports bar. And another reporter that I knew who was African American had been invited as well. And we filmed our spot. Okay, hopefully I'm back. But anyway, we had a couple of ginger ales after the filming was done, and then within 20 minutes or something, we were leaving the bar, and we had it in plastic cups.
Right.
like those solo cups. And I had finished mine, and the other reporter who was African American, had his in his hand, and we're walking out the door, and then we get outside the door, and he's standing there, and he's got this cup, and he's looking around, and there's no wastebasket. Well, we stand there for about 10 more minutes, just finishing up our conversation, and then we're about to say goodbye, and he starts walking away, and he still can't find a wastebasket, so he sets the car on the 1/4 cup of beer on a trunk, and keeps walking, and I keep walking, and all of a sudden, a police officer turns his lights on. He was parked in the parking lot, and he gets out. Now, this is in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
He gets out. He walks up to the journalist and starts harassing him, like beyond belief, considering that all he had done.
Right.
To be honest, I was scared for him. Right. So I was standing there, and I turned around and kind of came back, and he goes, "This doesn't involve you." And I said, "Well, I'm with him." And so I just waited there, and it didn't escalate, but it was really uncomfortable for 5 or 7 minutes. And when we were done, he took the thing and took it back in, and we walked out. He goes, "I'm sure glad you were here." Because he felt that uncomfortable. Now, I don't know what would have happened. It may have just been fine. He may have just didn't like that, because it was inconsiderate, obviously, for him not to.
Let's assume then that police officer had more of an issue with him because of his skin color, right?
Yeah.
Well, but what do we do about that? Like, how do you can't pass laws to change somebody's attitude?
Well, no, but you can certainly afford them, afford African Americans the same rights we have.
But I mean, but it ultimately comes down to that police officer at that time that's having the interaction with them to make sure that his rights are protected. So he has rights there now, anyways. Like but it's the attitude that it's
right
from the police officer to a black man. So I mean, it's got to change. But I'm saying that you're trying to legislate or come up with laws or whatever you want to do to change somebody's attitude towards another person because their skin color is different.
No, I know what you're saying. That it's a difficult thing, and it starts long before. Whoever becomes a police officer.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. It's an issue around the world. It's race, it's religion. I mean, it's
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no fun, I'm sure, being an Arab.
Yeah.
Or Mid-Easterner in today's world.
Yeah, we can't just here I'm preaching, but it's like we got to get to the point. We just say whoever this person is, whatever their religious belief is, that's their business. It's not my business, right? And, that black man is no different than I am, other than the fact he's got black skin.
No, I know, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, you've been listening to Laidlaw and Allen Political Report. No, not the hockey report, but we'll be back later in the week. Please
see you Wednesday, guys.